Everybody, I'm sure, is familiar with Chat GPT. I'm gonna go through this part relatively quickly because I want to get to the demonstration portion, which I think is going to be a lot more interesting. But I do want to give you some background on Chat GPT, how it works at a very high level, so you have a better understanding of how it works, and that'll help you use it better, I think. So first, we need to talk about narrow AI versus a general AI. Narrow AI. It's basically what we have right now, okay? It can do one thing. It can't, it's not a human being. It's not human intelligence. It can do one task. So ChatGPT can predict text. Stable Diffusion can create images, right? It does one thing. And again, that's what we currently have. As opposed to general AI, which is also referred to as strong AI, this can learn and grow. It can apply knowledge, right? So meaning, like I say, if, we know that all ducks are, mallards or whatever. I don't know. That's not a true statement. But it can apply that knowledge to a situation versus ChatGPT is just predicting tokens, and we'll talk about what that means in a minute. Social and creative, right? It can talk to you. It can be creative. It can come up with new ideas. Again, ChatGPT, if you've used it, you might be thinking, well, wait a minute, ChatGPT can do all that stuff. It can't. It's really good at tricking you into thinking it can, but it cannot. And as I said, we don't have this AI yet. They're working on it. It's the holy grail. And when it happens, it's going to be crazy, but we're not there yet. We're real close, I think, but we're not there yet. So what is machine learning? This is basically just where we train models on data using a technique called deep learning. It's a subset of machine learning. Uses neural networks. It's how they train these models to do what they do. It's basically just statistics. Braden talked a lot about this stuff in his Lunch and Learn last month. Some of this stuff should seem familiar. It's really all the same thing. And at the end of the day, it's just statistical probabilities. That's all these models do. So natural language processing. This is the type of AI that Chat GPT is built on. Focuses on interaction between computers and humans through natural language, right? You've been using these for years, most likely, and you don't even know. Google Translate, your phone, right? I have an Android, I'm sure iOS does this as well, but I'm typing a text, and you know how it shows you the next word? That's what it is. That's how it's doing it. It's just a predictive model. ChatGPT is basically doing what your phone does, except turbocharged, like insanely turbocharged. Right, so we talk about ChatGPT and language models. These are models that can generate human-like text. Again, GPT is a predictive model. It's a new technology. A new implementation of this technology. They trained it using a technique called transformer decoder, and they trained it on basically everything. You can see this is what so Common Crawl, this is just a web Common Crawl, 41 billion tokens. A token's about a word. So about 41 billion words, basically. Yeah, basically they trained it on everything. Everything they could get their hands on, they trained it on. So it does know everything up to a certain point. So what is it? What does it know? Right? It's good at, right? It can write essays or poetry. It can answer questions. It can create code. It can do more than that too. We'll go over some use cases, but again, it's bad at. It doesn't know anything past its training cutoff. Training cutoff was in September of 2001, I believe. So 2021, yeah. So anything past that, it just doesn't know. They're working on, from what I've read, they're working on allowing it to do Google searches. That's going to be nuts. When that happens, it's going to be bonkers. But right now, it only knows things up to September 2021. Can't perceive a reason. Again, it's going to give you the illusion that it's reasoning and perceiving and understanding what you say. It's not. It's just a really good trick, but it doesn't understand you the way you think it does. And then it's really easily abused. And that's something that isn't really necessarily pertinent to this conversation, because this is something that we as an industry and as a society are going to have to tackle with AI in general. Is there's just a lot of implications that we need to think about, and not just go, hey, AI is great, we should just replace everybody's jobs with AI, because that's just not going to work. So, important to note, and this is a slide everybody should pay attention to, I think, because this is got a really cool punk rock robot on it, for number one. Number two, this is what you really need to get into your head. GPT doesn't know things, right? It's just following a pattern. So I asked it to give me some examples of illustrating this in a user-friendly way, and so this was the one I liked. So think of like a guitarist playing a solo on their guitar, right? It's a brand new guitar solo. So let's say Robbie's up there jamming, and his solo comes up, and he's going to improvise a guitar solo, right? It's not on the record. He's never played it before. He just improvises it. And I'm sure Robbie has great knowledge in musical theory, but he doesn't necessarily understand every aspect of musical theory, but because of the years of training that he's done and his knowledge of scales and rhythm patterns and things like that, he doesn't know what note he's going to play in 30 seconds, but he knows what the next note will be. And then he knows what the next note will be. And then he knows what the next note will be, because it sounds right. It feels right. It's in rhythm. That's all Chat GPT's doing. It's just predicting the next word. So, and it's really good at doing it. It seems really impressive what it does, but it's just predicting the next word. So,
just a jazz band. Just a jazz band.
It is just a jazz band. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
New t-shirt idea?
Yeah. GPT's just a jazz band. Right. So a couple last things to talk about in this presentation, then we'll get on to the demo. Ethical concerns we want to be concerned with GPT. Data privacy, right? I did check their documentation. They do not train their models on any of your information. So you can be confident in that when you're typing things into GPT, they're not keeping that, they're not training it, they're not stealing your code, they're not doing any of that. They're taking that in the current session and analyzing it, and then that data, from what I've read and understood, is discarded. So, yeah. We need to be concerned about disinformation, and this is going to be a big problem with AI in general. Deep fakes, AI-generated images, AI-generated text. Like, it's going to get harder and harder to know what's real because of AI. And so, we're all going to need just to be skeptical of everything we see going forward. And then biases in data. This is a really, really big one. This might be the biggest one in this list, because if we start using bias, we have to make sure that the data we're giving it isn't biased, right? And that can be pretty hard to find sometimes, and I'm assuming we have AI solutions for looking for biases in data, but we're going to need more of that as we go forward, because we don't want to start making predictions off, let's say we've got some data that, incorrectly eschews a certain minority group to certain actions, and then so we want to be sure to avoid things like that. Right, and then use cases, educational, customer service, entertainment. I think this list is much larger. I think it's almost limitless what we can use this for. Right. Okay, so let's do a demo, and then we can talk about, these slides are in I put them in box. So if you want to review these slides, I also, those data points I found, I did put a reference here. So if you want to look at where I got these numbers from, you can check that out. So let's take a look at Chat GPT. This is Chat GPT. If you're not familiar with it, this is my personal Chat GPT that I've been messing with for months. Just kind of poking at it, seeing what it can do. And I'm going to go through some of these because there's some pretty cool stuff in here. I'm going to start off with one of the first things I did. I play Dungeons and Dragons, as a lot of you may do. If you don't, you're probably very familiar with it. But this is one of the first things my mind went to was, oh my God, I can just get unlimited Dungeons and Dragons content out of Chat GPT for free. And I was right. So one thing, let me, before I go through this, how's my time doing? Okay, I need to be quick. One thing, I know I did a poll because I wanted to see if this would be a useful demonstration for people. And some people are saying that they're not exactly getting the results they want out of Chat GPT. That was the biggest feedback I saw. So I hope that the knowledge I gave you about it can help you with that a little bit. But the general rule that I use when I'm writing for Chat GPT is you want to make sure that you write concise statements. So don't ramble on. Don't use flowery language. It's funny. I'm having to break my habit of being polite to it. You can see I'm saying please, but I'm wasting a token every time I do that. So be more concise, right? Keep your language concise. Try to keep it ambiguous. You don't necessarily need a lot of descriptors. It has a lot of context. But so you can see a great example here, right? I asked it to describe White Plume Mountain. Well, White Plume Mountain, that's my problem. I wrote it White Plum. I just noticed that months later. It gave me a description of a Chinese mountain. I was looking for a fantasy setting. So I said, please describe it to me as it pertains to the world of Greyhawk, which is a D&D campaign setting. And then it got it right? So sometimes we may find that we have to give it a little bit more context to kind of get what we want. Now here's a good example of things it's not really good at. I was like, can you draw me a map of it? Because this is pretty public knowledge at this point. The maps are out there. ChatGPT doesn't really understand spatial relationships, right? So it really, really fell on its face when it was trying to do maps, right? Like here, it tried to render a map. It did a really bad job. I told it to use ASCII art. It was familiar with that, but you can see it sort of kind of gets it. It's not particularly good. Again, it doesn't really understand space. And I didn't understand this at this time. I didn't get that about it. It really can just predict tokens. So, but it did okay, right? So I went through and I was like, okay, well, can you generate some other maps for me? Things like that. It did all right. I wouldn't recommend it for this. But what it did start getting really cool at during this was I was like, okay, make rooms and then give me descriptions of the rooms, and it had no problems with that. And then I asked it to, give me better descriptions. I started telling it, hey, I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons and the players are this level. Make the things fit that. Anyway, yeah. And then I'm like, give me monsters. And so then I'm like, start making up new monsters. It gave me stat blocks for the monsters. And then I was like, okay, I want to see if I can get it to generate images for me. So if you're familiar with Stable Diffusion is like Chat GPT. I can give it prompts and it'll give me images. And so I taught it, here's how you should make a prompt. Taught it how to do that. Here's an example of me teaching it something it doesn't know, right? So I went to Stable Diffusion website and I grabbed an example of how to create good fonts and I gave it to it. And I'm like, here's how you make good fonts. Now, give me some fonts. And it made me prompts and I tried them out and they worked really good. I can demo these after this if you'd like to see a demo of Stable Diffusion. I'm not going to demo Stable Diffusion in this Lunch and Learn. Okay, so here's another example. Again, we're doing D&D. right, Drake walked into my office the other day. This is about a month ago, maybe, or it was in May, and told me this really cool idea for a D&D thing, and I'm like, cool, let's write it. And so I threw it in, and then it started generating this campaign, right? You can do stuff like tell it to keep going, right? It ran out of space for its response, and I'm like, keep going, right? And then I was like, do this, do that, blah, 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 blah. And then I can go in and start I went in and started, here's where things started getting weird. Right here, it was a regular fantasy adventure. And then I'm like, all right, let's see how stupid we can get. And I told it to theme anybody familiar with Doug Dimmadome from the Fairly Odd Parents? So I'm like, let's start being stupid with this. So it started training things over, turned it into all this stuff. We made a schnitzel monster. And again, I have prompts for all this stuff for generating images. You can have it generate dialogue for your NPCs. So this would be good for chatbots, right? Like customer service chatbots or generating copy. I know you guys have used it for that. If you need to write a blog for the company, you could write a bullet pointed list of your points and it'll spit out your blog. Yes, this is anyway.
So, question on that, Jared. Have you, in your research, when it's, for example, generating copy, is that proprietary to you, or there's been any discussions on copyright rules and all that fun stuff as far as what you're generating?
It would be a brand new generated body of text. So this isn't, okay. And that is one thing that with AI, we're seeing a lot of misconceptions about the way AIs work. A lot of people think the image generating AIs are collage machines, things like that. That's not what this is doing. This isn't taking a little bit from here and a little bit from here and a little bit, and it's not gluing them together. It's an iterative process that's describing one point of data at a time to result in a brand new composition. It may resemble things depending on your guidance, but it's a brand new composition. So, no problem. This one's not too interesting. Right, so code assistance, right? We can have it do code assistance for us. Here I had it. You're helping me write floater code. It was very happy to do it. I just tell it what I wanted, right? I want you to give me a layout that's does this and this and da 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 da, and told it, and it spit it out. I think this worked pretty good. I think I threw it in and it was pretty close to what I wanted. Again, this stuff's not perfect. You can't take code from this and stick it in and expect it to work perfectly. But it may do 90% of the work for you, right? So code assistance. This is my personal project, so don't be stealing my ideas. But I wanted a game design document. Yeah, I know, right? Stealing all of it. I needed a game design document for a project I'm working on that probably won't get finished because I never finish my personal projects, but that's okay. And so I'm like, I want to make this game design document. This to me was mind-blowing. Okay, I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. And so I'm like, help me make a game design document. And it's like, here's how you make a game design document. And I'm like, man, I know how to make a game design document. I want you to hold my hand. So I said, I want you to create a game design document. Assist me by providing prompts, and I may answer to fill out the design document. So it spit out the whole game design document and then asked me, what should I fill in here? Right? So it's saying, here's a game concept. What's the title of your game? Da-da-da-da-da-da. And so I went through, and you can see, I went through and I answered everything, right? And then it's like, hey, that's cool. And then it gave me some feedback, and it's cool because it'll brainstorm with you. It'll be like, hey, that's cool. Did you think about this? Did you think about that? You could try this. So it's really nice that it does that. So I went through, I filled out everything. It asked for, at one point, and this is where, so if I look at 4, it's like, so engine selection, development tools, story and characters, right? So I talked a little bit about how I was thinking about using AI in this to produce dynamic stories, and then it's like, oh, that's really cool. You'll need to think about these things as well. So then I answered those questions out of sequence, right? So I'm out of sequence now, right? I had a sequence, I had a list, I was filling it out. It's added doc data to this, and it's remembering. So it's this whole thing's dynamic, and so I'm just moving through, answering everything as I move through. This took a few hours, but this was way less time than I would have spent just writing this by hand. And then so I answered all of its questions, and then at the very end, I said, give it to me, and it just spit out a document. So this is great, right? Like for Becky, for Rebecca, for a lot of you folks that do more clerical tasks, right? Or even for us as developers, like you can just throw your ideas in this thing, say, here's what I'm thinking, show me what you got, and it'll be like, cool, here you go. Here's some great stuff. And then you can tweak it as you need. I'm not going to click this one because it's very personal, but I've been telling it stories about my life, and it's generating an autobiography for me. I'm not going to be showing that to anybody, but it's doing a pretty cool job. This was me playing around with baseball stats information, and I'll go through how I did the stats, the transactions update in a few minutes. This is one I've been playing with a lot lately. I noticed, and it's not good at this. I haven't found that it's good at this. A lot of our contractors are from South America. I don't know if any of them are on the call. If you are, hello. And I found out something that I didn't know a few years ago, that people that live in one South American country and people that live in another South American country speak completely different versions of Spanish, apparently. So I was like, can it figure out that regional difference, right? Because there's been times when I've Google translated something and sent it to somebody, and they've been like, this is stupid. This doesn't make any sense. I hate this. And so I was wondering if it could do a better job. I don't see that it does yet, but I bet it will one day. So I was trying to see if, like, I'm from the South, so I was trying to see if I could get it to use more colloquialisms, and I bet I could with enough pushing. If I told it specifically, like, I want you to use colloquial regional dialect, it might be able to do it. Haven't had a lot of luck with it.
So that goes back to the context of the data set, right? So we're talking about data set bias.
Exactly.
The data sets that it's been trained on are probably almost overwhelmingly in English, like probably like
Right.
90%
Right.
in English, if not more.
Right.
So when you start talking about other languages, that's what we're talking about, where this thing is not smart. It doesn't have the ability to go to Google Translate and like go read a book about whatever. If it was in the training set,
Yeah.
it was, but if it wasn't, then it wasn't.
And a really interesting note that you mentioned Google Translate. I compared its results to Google Translate. They were identical. So I have a feeling it's using very similar, I don't want to say algorithms, but that data for language transformation is probably very similar to whatever Google's using. So
when you go out and you're asking for this information, where are you going to?
I'm not going anywhere.
Okay.
Chat GPT just knows it.
Yeah,
Yeah, so it basically knows everything that was publicly available on the internet before September 2021. Yeah, it basically knows. Yeah. But you can teach it things. You can tell it things. This is a really cool thing they just added the other day. Reagan turned me on to it. I immediately played with. It's incredible. So this is a mode. It's only for GPT-4, so you'd have to subscribe to get it. I pay $20 a month for GPT-4. But it gives you the ability to upload data sets into it. So I uploaded a comma-separated value list of movies, right? Basically, this was supposed to be data on every movie ever made, right? And I was like, here, analyze this. And you can see where I stuck it in there and analyzed it. And I was like, cool, it's movie data. And they're like, great. Now start telling me things about this data, right? So what's the longest movie ever made, right? Apparently it was Gettysburg. Apparently that crap ran like 3.5 hours. Yeah. So then I'm like, show me some interesting patterns related to these movies, right? So then it was like, it gave me some, general information. But then I'm like, so can you detect any patterns or correlations? It did. It said that, highest rated are drama, adventures, action, comedy, crime. These directors do well. Average runtime of 2 hours does very... So you can see, I can give it data, and this is great for us. We got tons of data. You give it data. Oh, what's going on with whatever? Oh, that's Chat GPT. You throw it a CSV, and then you go, hey, what's going on with this? And it's going to be like, hey, I know this. It gets even cooler because, again, remember, Chat GPT, I can use it to be creative and do stuff. So I said, make me 10 movie titles that you think would do very well given this data. And to me, you can read these if you want. Those all sound like bangers. I would watch every one of these movies. They all sound fantastic. So again, we can take it, and even though it can't apply knowledge, it can definitely synthesize new data using existing data and trends. It's really good at finding patterns, right? And then this was a kind of an interesting one that, this is what I used to prepare this presentation. So Chat GPT wrote my presentation for me. So the slideshow we watched, this is it, right? I went through, of course, and researched and did more things, but I had it give me, some examples. Here's where I got the example of the musician, right? I said, you did, but I changed it to a punk rocker because that's just cooler than jazz. And then the title came right from this, right? First one off the list. That was the title of this. And so I asked it some things about what was it trained on, helped it have me define some things that I wasn't completely full of. There was one more I wanted to show you. Oh, here, this one. This was a cool one.
If you didn't use ChatGPT
I kind of was required to, wasn't I? All those robot images were AI generated as well, if you couldn't tell. Those were a lot of fun. Yeah, those were all AI generated. So this was a cool use case. Reagan and I were talking about this yesterday, I think. I tell it what I've got in my pantry. And hey, I feel like eating. I said, I've got chicken breast. I've got a fully stocked pantry. I feel like eating something from the Middle East. What should I eat? Here you go, eat chicken shawarma. I know about chicken shawarma. Chicken shawarma is boring. Give me something different. So then it's like, how about moussaka? And I'm like, cool. I've never made moussaka. That sounds cool. And then Reagan's like, well, what about vegan stuff? And I'm like, then I was like, can you make a brand new dish based off Mediterranean cooking? Reagan says it did terribly. I think it did all right. I'd eat this. She said she would not eat the pomegranate salad you didn't like.
The salsa, it's terrible because they have a whole pomegranate arrows in there. So it means you're going to be crunching. And then it's got almonds. You're going to be crunching.
I like it, though. It'll be crunchy.
Oh, see, I like the crunch.
I like the crunch, too. I think this would be good. I don't know. Maybe I'm going to have to cook it and find out. We'll have to find out. And then I was like, give me vegetarian pork katsu, right? So it gave me vegetarian recipe, right? It basically just replaced the tofu and the pork, or pork for tofu. That's generally Chat GPT. A couple more things I want to go through. Usage for developers. This is general usage as an assistant. If you want to implement this into code, they do have APIs. They're very affordable. I went through and checked our usage for, so for June. This was one day where we were loading transactions for an entire year. So this day was high. Other than that, we go out every 2 hours. We go to the Major League Baseball site. I'll show you the code in a second. We go to the Major League Baseball site. We scrape the pages, and then we send all that data to Chat GPT to turn it into data objects. We do this every 2 hours, so we do it 12 times a day. And it costs 29 cents. So doing a whole year of these cost about $20 or so. It's very affordable, relatively. It's going to get cheaper. There's already competitors coming out hard. I was reviewing a really amazing coding app this morning that I really think we should look at. I'm going to show you some of the cool stuff it does. It just makes unit tests automatically. It just generates documentation instantly. It scanned my whole code base. It generated release notes. Right. So reference for OpenAI. Here's the playground. So this is for their API documented. This isn't Chat GPT. This is the GPT access on their playground. There are a couple different modes for it. You have a chat option, which is similar to Chat GPT. It's like having a conversation. There's complete. It's much cheaper. That's what we're actually using on, and I'm seeing that little legacy tag now. It's making me nervous. It's dumb, right? It's really good for the tasks that I used it for because I had the data. I didn't really need to make any assumptions. I just needed you to take this data that's in an unformatted format and put it into a formatted format. So the completion was really, really good at that. Same for editing. It just edits your documents. But you can you can play around with it here if you want. I'm not going to do too much. I'm really running out of time. I'm already way over. Yeah, and let me just quickly review my code from, I want to show you what I did for prospects real quick. So, and I know non-programmers, your eyes are probably glazing over, but basically this is all it is, right? Just our configuration, new up a new instance, I cleaned the data, right? Cleaned up white spaces, commas, things like that. And then it's just create a text completion. I want you to use this model. The temperature setting is like how creative it'll be when predicting. Usually want to keep this kind of low, right? You don't want it to be too creative. Maximum token size, the more you lower this, the shorter your responses are. So, but it'll lower your cost as well, right? Because everything's charged on tokens. And this includes, when we talk about max tokens, we're talking about this is included, right? So everything you send is included in that token count, and then everything it gives you back is included in that token count. So the whole thing is limited to 4096 or something. So I give it some context, right? It was doing this thing where it wasn't kind of giving me what I wanted, so I had to tweak. And these are the things with using this you'll have to kind of play with. Because I think I just said, give me JSON objects of whatever, and it gave me some crazy stuff. And then I'm like, okay, it needs to know to only return JSON. And so then it only started giving me JSON. Well, then it started making assumptions about these enums that I have listed out here. So then I was like, okay, well, I'll give you the enums, right? But ultimately, I had to tweak it a bunch. So this is a prompt. This is telling it like, this is what I want you to do. Here's an example of the data you're going to receive, right? So this was a copy of how the data was going to come in scraped. And then this is how I want you to return it, right? And then and this is a really good example because you can see how it follows the pattern. It's just following this pattern because I've set the context to be that. I could set it to something different if I wanted, but for this session, for this call, it's going to follow this.